out, reach for the sky. FPK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast.
Hi, welcome back to Future Proof Knowledge Podcast. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different. It is Olive and me. I'm not a founder and I'm not a clinician. I'm speaking as a parent, as Jace's mom, and I want to talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to neurodiversity, parenting, coaching, and real life support. I am joined by Olive Hickmott.
Hello and welcome. I'm Olive Hickmott from the UK, and I specialise. I'm a coach for neurodiverse students, and I tend to specialise in dyslexia and ADHD. And it's interesting to compare my experience with those I coach with a mum with a child with autism.
Well, I'm super excited about our chat today. I think you're going to give me some great insights and everybody here. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about expectations, the nuances of different types of expectations there are, maybe a little bit of grief that comes with that. And then we're going to move into presuming competence, giving our kids a real opportunity. And then the hard moments that actually lead to growth and give us opportunity, and why consistency across home, school, and therapy really matters.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's start with expectations. So before I had my kiddo, I believed that I didn't have expectations. I was super proud about that. Then I had my kiddo, like a lot of things that happened when becoming a parent. My ideas of being a parent before I became, there was different reality. There was a bit of a gap there. And so before I had my child, I thought I was open-minded, that I wouldn't put any expectations on them. I would let them be who they were supposed to be and follow their own interests. Until about a year after having him, I realized I was grieving that I wasn't hearing "I love you, mommy." That was hard for me because I didn't think I had expectations, and then clearly I had a self-fulfilling expectation, and I realized that I could hear "I love you, mommy" in so many different forms. So the nuance of expectations. So that expectation was self-fulfilling for me. We all assume that when we imagine in our heads what it's going to be like having a parent, we usually don't imagine any type of learning disability in that imagination. We don't imagine our children to be nonverbal or to have dyslexia. And so to be real, that is definitely something that you would need to emotionally go through and understand and give the attention that it deserves, and then leave that behind you because we got lots of work to do. So with the nuance of expectations, it's also important to have appropriate expectations because it's scientifically been proven that children live up to your expectations. So there's a difference of an expectation that's a self-fulfilling need for a parent, and then also having expectations for your children so that they have the most opportunities in life, and that kind of leads us into presuming competence. And what does presuming competence actually mean and look like in real life? And how does that affect our kiddos? It provides them opportunities that if we didn't presume that they had the competence to do something, then we wouldn't give them the opportunity to actually try and do it. So for me, presuming competence has provided my son the ability to be potty trained. It took us 2.5 years for potty training. It looked a lot different, but the opportunities that provides him, it allows him to be in the community. It allows him more opportunities in life. It's not just about potty training. So for us, it was not an option not to do it. It was the only thing that we just had to figure out how to make it happen. He deserves that opportunity to be a part of the community and to have independence. And we don't use the word he can't. And that's part of presuming competence. So for example, I noticed my son in the mornings when the aide would put him in the van, they would just buckle up his seatbelt for him. And I knew that he knows how to put a seatbelt on. When we go on adventures in the car, I holler in the back, put on your seatbelt, and he puts it right on. So I had to let everybody at his school know that he knows how to put a seatbelt on, and all you have to do is ask him to put his seatbelt on. And now he does it. But since the aides were not presuming competence, they didn't even consider to ask him. They just did it. And so I don't know their intentions behind that. But either way, my son deserves the opportunity to have independence and, show his skills. So, yeah.
Can I just ask you a question, Alicia? Well, your great description there. And I think it's so important to presume competence. And it's also so important, something you said a few moments ago, is about figuring out how to make it happen. Because for some kids, they'll do it one way. For some kids, they'll do it another way. We all know that kids don't learn in the same way. But what we tend to do is put them through a school system with or without any learning challenges, which assumes they're going to learn in the same way. And we don't stand back and go, how on earth are we going to get this child to do this? And the other thing is, when you're presuming competence, if you carried on letting him be buckled up by the school, probably sooner or later, he'll have resisted actually being told to do it himself, because he's always had the support there. He's always had the crutch there, as it were. Whereas you're almost teaching him non-competence by doing it for him when he can already do a skill. And that, I think, comes through the whole of learning challenges, that you can see that challenge all the way. And what was some of the ways you had to stand back? Can you explain and go, we're going to do this differently? How to figure out what to do, I suppose, is the question.
Oh, that's super hard. And that's, like you said, so individual for each learner. So another example of something that was difficult that kind of leads into what you were just saying is, like, how do you figure it out? Well, you know your child best, but using motivational factors, also being persistent and consistent. My son will try he's very clever and smart. So I kind of have two examples of that recently happened. So for figuring out how to make it work. So my son would not let me brush his hair. It was an hour to 2 hours of struggle. We were emotionally spent when it was over. We were probably sweaty and both crying. It was, and like having to brush his hair every day. So we do that every day. And it was exhausting. He really likes his curls. So we didn't want to just have to cut off his hair. He always wanted my phone. That's a huge motivator for him. And so I just thought, well, let me try this. Only when he's having his hair brushed can he have my phone. And he started to understand that connection. So we went from it being like a 2-hour struggle and we were both emotionally spent to him requesting for his hair to be brushed multiple times a day.
Wow.
So he could get access to my phone. And then we slowly transitioned the phone out. And now I brush his hair in the bathtub because it's wet. I need to brush his hair when it's wet because he has multiple curls. And it takes maybe like 5 minutes max. No energy, extra energy spent. And now we can accomplish it. Now for another kiddo that might not be motivated by the phone, that might not work. So really adjusting it to the individual's motivation is key there. And then having an activity that you only do when you're doing that unwanted, like the behavior that you're trying to work on. So
I think those two are really great ideas. And it is a question of standing back and looking at what the options are. How can I do this differently? And of course, in school, we have a challenge. In most mainstream schools, we don't have time to actually do that. But it's quite often, I mean, I've coined an expression in the work I've been doing lately in plain sight, is that quite often you find that you don't need a diagnosis for a particular problem. If you actually really look at what the child's doing, you can tell how he's learning, and you can match into that.
Yeah. You can't do cookie cutter. Like no child is the same and no child has the same exact interests. And they're different motivators and
exactly
are going to be different.
Right. So where are we going next, Elisa?
Well, I've also heard from my child's therapist and teachers when we need something to happen or he needs, let's say, a safety gear. I hear he won't. And I'm like, we're the adults and he's needing our guidance and help. So we don't do, he won't, it's too hard. So we had a behavior, for example, that he was hitting his knee on his face for a stim. It could be, it might not be an angry moment. It could be an excited moment, but either way, it was not safe. He chipped his tooth. So we needed to figure out how to protect him. And so since we're talking about safety, this isn't an option. We need to, as adults, protect this child. So we decided he would be wearing knee pads. And as we know, getting a person with neurodiversity and sensory issues is not the easiest thing to do. You're saying wear knee pads. It's not just that simple. So I was told by his school and his therapist who attends school with him that he won't keep them on. He keeps taking them off. And so that evening when he came from school, I was persistent and consistent. I followed him around the house and we had some major meltdowns, some major dysregulation. It was not pretty or fun. It was messy. But I just stayed persistent and consistent because I knew that my son was testing me to see if this was something that he didn't have to do. And after an hour of that, and he realized that I was just going to ask him to pull him back up or put him on. And I was staying right with him throughout the house. I was staying right on him. He kept them on. And since then, he's kept them on at school. He keeps them on whenever he's told that he needs to be wearing them. And there hasn't been an issue since. So something that a team of people who were supposed to be supporting him simply threw up their hands and said, he can't. I provided him the opportunity to keep them on and to understand that it wasn't an option. And now he is safe when he does that stim. And he does that stim a lot less than he did without the knee pads on, because it's not giving him the same sensory needs as it was.
So has he taken up a different stim in replacement for it, or has that just completely reduced, do you think?
That's a great question. And it was a brand new stim. I think it was a brand new year when it was beginning. And so he just does it less. He didn't replace it. Now, I do have an example of a time that we chose to replace a behavior and provide him that replacement, so that because he still needed that sensory input when it would occur. So for that particular circumstance, we didn't choose to do a replacement, but rather just make it so that it wasn't providing him the same input, and so he wouldn't have the desire to do it. The example of a replacement was that for some reason, the sound of my husband clearing his throat or coughing triggers dysregulation with my son. So
right, okay.
I know, right? For some
That's
reason,
a bit limiting.
I mean, that's a lot to have to contain. Which you can't. We all have to live and not be afraid to cough or clear our throat.
Yeah.
Whatever. For me, he didn't have any issue with me coughing or clearing my throat.
Interesting.
I know, right? And I wonder sometimes if that's because he grew in my belly and like my cough and clearing my throat is kind of part of him. I don't know.
And maybe you have a different tone to your cough.
That too, right?
Yeah.
So his behavior when that would happen we found out the first time it happened, we kind of giggled because we were like, whoa. He came up and he slapped my husband's face. So
pretty dramatic.
And Alyssa's like, oh, we were like, oh, then we were like, oh, that's not cute or going to be good long term, So after it happened like the second or third time, and we realized that this was becoming a behavior and it was a thing. So I obviously, and as soon as he would kiss or slap my husband's face, he wouldn't be dysregulated. So it seemed to be meeting a sensory need. I know, right? So I was like, he can't be slapping your face. But obviously this is a particular event that's happening, and he needs some sensory input. He needs something for regulation. He's trying to self-regulate. For some reason, that was in the form of a slap. So I was like, we need to replace this. And the first thing that popped into my head was redirect him to kiss your face, because who doesn't want to kiss? That's not going to hurt anybody, and it's still providing him a sensory input. So we redirected, and now that was 5 years ago, and now my husband gets a kiss every time he coughs or clears his throat.
Gosh, can you offer some advice to listeners who, I mean, you've done a fabulous job here, but I'm not sure I would have ever thought of that one. you know, you've got really useful hacks or whatever you like to call them that really work for your son. How does the average parent go about learning what might work or developing what might work, or what
Like how
advice can we give them?
So I was extremely fortunate. I get that I had privilege and that I had great opportunity. The first year of my son's therapy, when he was 3 years old, we had in-home ABA therapy for a year in our home. And
Okay.
since I owned my own business at the time, I could work whatever hours. Um, and so from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day, we would have a therapist, 2 different sessions. We would have a therapist for the morning session and a therapist for the afternoon session. And I was a part of it all. I could run a session. I don't know how to like write the goals and get to the next development stages. But if there was a plan in place, I could run the program because I was there every day. It also allowed us to be consistent 24 hours throughout his day rather than just the sessions.
And that
So,
must be really important.
yeah. Because consistency lets
Yeah.
them understand what's expected. And so I understand that that might not be the position that every parent can have, but that is definitely the basis from my understanding to help my child in development and succeed and provide those opportunities. The replacement behavior, I learned that in, through that year that I got to do in-home therapy with them. And then after that year, he went to the facility, but that allowed me to have a baseline of information and understand what a therapy session looked like, what it looked like to master a goal, what it looked like to brainstorm those ideas to provide him that opportunity to master a goal. And then I did rabbit holes of research on my own. I've spent thousands of hours doing my own research, but that baseline itself, having like real experience and seeing it happen, but was priceless. But I do understand that I was very privileged to have that opportunity. Yeah.
So they gave you the skill. You would like doing on the job training, as it were. They were giving you the skills. Do you find that you moved on to a later place where you're giving his therapists or people in school, wherever he interacts, do you find you're giving them advice now?
Yes. I have. So he was going to a facility, in-house facility where I would drop him off for ABA therapy. And so most parents would then use a service that a lot of ABA therapists provide is potty training. When they have the program and they explain to the parents and hope that at home we follow the program too. I had been asked about potty training a couple times and I was like, I don't think he's ready. When I decided that he was ready, there was an opportunity to take a class at the University of Houston Clear Lake, and it was ran and taught by a BCBA, and it was free. So I went to the class, and they provided us all the information we needed. That's kind of where I got my idea of, because we had a potty only activity. It was hardcore, but they taught us how to implement the potty training and then gave us all of the resources necessary, all the data sheets and taking the data. So I came up with his potty training plan. I implemented his potty training plan. I told the ABA Therapy Center about our potty training plan, provided them the resources and the data sheets necessary, provided them the data sheets I had taken for the potty training. So I came to them with it and just asked them to support me with it. He's home more than he is at the therapy center. And even with that game plan, I knew before we went into potty training that we were not going to fail. That was not an option for us. This is a life skill that we are going to have. And I
Is it like your presumed competence coming through loud and clear?
Once we took off a diaper, there was never going to be a diaper put on. As soon as they came off, there was no more diapers in our home. That was not an option. So when potty training started, we started on the weekend so that he wasn't in therapy, so that I could be with him 24/7 while we're doing this. We started the Friday when he got home from therapy, and we sat on the toilet 15 minutes on, 5 minutes off. That was the first stage that we had to accomplish with no accidents. We were literally, so that 5 minutes that we had off the potty, I would run, make a sandwich real quick, and then we would run back to the bathroom. We were having, so we had potty only activities. Our potty only activity that I chose for my son because of his motivations was some markers and coloring books with his special interest of Marvel characters. And then, we just did it. And so instead of me going to the ABA Therapy Center and saying, I don't know how to do this, I just went and educated myself and became an expert on potty training and told them how we needed to do it. And so having that much support, he had no option but to succeed, no matter how it looked or how long it took. That just not, yeah.
There is so much in that story. Thank you, Alicia. And funnily enough, I was talking to somebody today about which might be autism, might be ADHD, or it might be dyslexia or whatever, and saying it's not necessarily the child's problem. It's what the people around them can adjust to actually understand them better with whatever challenges they have. And that comes through so loudly and clearly with your story there. So what did you want to talk about next? I interrupted you. Sorry, I sidelined.
No, you're asking great questions. They're so insightful. Sometimes I get into my own little world and I don't know what's different. I don't have any. I only have one child, and he's my child, and that's just how I know how. I don't know how to parent a different way, and so sometimes I don't understand that what we do isn't typical because it's typical for me. That's what we do. So I think your insights and your questions are perfect
and even with two children in the same family, things like potty training can be completely different for the first one than it is for the second one. I've seen that in so many families. So
yes.
It's you're learning as you go along, and you have to be open to learning new stuff, and it isn't going to work with everybody.
Exactly. There was an example that I had here that I was going to talk about that, so for example, for our expectations for our children, there are some that I had to that were self-fulfilling for me, like the I love you, mommy. Now I hear I love you, mommy in so many different ways. He kisses my cheek, he cuddles me, he comes and gets me, and he prefers to be around me. All those things say what I thought I needed to hear verbally. But then there's expectations that are self-fulfilling for parents. And that's something that isn't necessarily just with neurodiversity. So for example, I hear a lot from parents, they had a dream of throwing a ball with their kid in the front yard, and now that's never going to happen. Well, that was actually for the parent, not the child. They wanted something fulfilled in their selves. But even if you have a neurotypical child, they might not be interested in throwing a ball with you.
Yeah. Precisely.
they might want to do art with you. Like that might be their special interest. They might, want to do equations with you. I don't know, and so yeah, gearing into actually seeing our child for who they are and supporting them for the individual that they are. We have so many layers of baggage as adults in
Yeah.
us. I always have to make sure that I'm focusing on presuming competence for my child for what's good for them, not what I think it should look like or
Yeah.
how it made me feel, what I wanted when I was a child.
Yeah, exactly.
Push all those different things about yourself away, and that is an example of happiness or life, and
Yeah.
look at your individual child.
I'd like to give you, the listeners, an example of some literacy work I did in a special needs school right back in the early days of when I was doing this work. And I'd been taught this way of encouraging literacy. And so I walked into my special needs school, which I happen to know the deputy head there. And I said, have you got any kids who are struggling with literacy? He said, we've got hundreds. Which ones do you want? And so I did some work up there with various kids. But one of them I always remember, he was diagnosed autistic. He was sitting in the back, the front of the classroom so that they could keep a bit of an eye on him. And he was absolutely struggling with doing anything that was he was basically playing with dinosaurs. And that was his thing. He really loved dinosaurs. So he was playing with dinosaurs. And they said he's just been doing this for the last 6 months, basically. He hasn't, ever since he's been in this class, he was 11. So he was just in secondary school in the UK. And so I walked over to him, and most of the time he was doing dinosaurs, but this particular moment, he got a plastic bag and he was tearing off bits of it, and he was dropping them on the table, and he got his hands like that round the edge of the what he was doing. And I looked over and I went, what's that? And he didn't speak. And I said, is that a dinosaur? And he goes, and I said, and why have you got your hands like that round it? And he looked at me and he gave me one of those looks that might have been, oh my God, this woman's really stupid. But he was being he wasn't verbal, so he was being very polite. And he looked and he just pointed at the open window. And I went, oh, if you move your hands, then the bits are going to fall on the floor. And so he went, yeah. And so the next thing was that I said, is that I've forgotten which dinosaur I said it was, but I got the wrong one, I think. But anyway, I said, you've got a dinosaur there. They had a really nice grass bank outside the window. So I said, can you move it up so it's on the grass bank? And you've got a really nice dinosaur outside the window. And he goes, mm-hmm. Then I wrote T-Rex on the piece of paper, thinking it was a T-Rex. And I held it up in front of where I could see he was looking at this grass mound. And I said, and so when I take it away, can you spell T-Rex? Thinking it's a really nice short word. And this is no word of a lie. He spelt Tyrannosaurus. And the teacher's going, what happened there? This was the first thing he spelt in 6 months. And from there on, they started teaching him more dinosaur words, building up his confidence that he could actually read and spell. And I just thought it was a fabulous story of going to where the child is. They're obsessed with bits of plastic. So instead of saying, oh, you can't do that or whatever, go, what are you doing? Oh, it's a dinosaur. Right, I got it. But
and it took your curiosity in that child.
Yes, and that's what you have to do is be curious. Why are they doing what they're doing? And he was, the teacher I knew was out of the class that day. And she said, when I told her the story later, she said, I cannot believe what you did, because to be quite honest, if I'd been there, I'd have just said, don't talk to him about dinosaurs, because that's all you're going to get is dinosaurs. And I went, no, I'm going to use the dinosaurs to help him. Use
That's
what they're
perfect.
really good at.
Yes, and interested in. I mean, we're all, you know, even typically we want to, you know, dive into what we prefer and what we're motivated for and what we have passion for. I love that story. And like how just the little bits of the plastic turned into, you know, anybody else just walking by who wasn't curious wouldn't have even understood or had that experience and
No.
gotten to know him. And yeah, it was so easy to walk past and not interact because of any type of differences, like verbal, and the opportunity that you gave him was incredible. That's really cool. Really cool.
Right, what's your next topic, Elise?
So we've organically, like, you, without even seeing my outline, you've kind of gone with it and like asked me questions and made the outline happen organically. So yeah, this is great. You're really good at observation, Olive.
I think that's the trick, actually, is observation and curiosity to find out about the child. I mean, one of the standard jokes I always have is that if somebody comes to see me, and I tend to focus on dyslexia and ADHD, I always start off with what are they good at? I don't start off with what are they bad at? And parents will look at me a bit weird and go, I brought them here because they've got all these things they can't do. And you're talking to them about what they can do. I always say to them, when they explain to me what they can do, which they're really happy about because it's their favorite subject, then I can tell how they're thinking. And I specialize in working with kids who've got astounding mental images. So if they start telling me about their mental images and they start moving their hands around to show me, almost showing me the mental images, what I say, what's the cat look like? And they go, oh, it's a really big one and it's orange and stripy, And so you know that they're seeing it. And so all you've got to do is just be more curious and get them on what they like doing, what they're having fun doing. And I will make another comment here because it was something I was thought about, which was we are very good at finding out what's wrong with a child. We are not as good at finding out what their strengths are. And I think that all goes back to the medical model. If you've broken your arm, it's all about, you're going to the doctors and it's all about what you can't do now because your arm's broken or whatever it is, or you've got some infection or something. Whereas I see with neurodiversity is that I always start off with what they're good at because they have got some fantastic skills normally, and they are potentially quite hidden from the world unless you are curious and try and find out about them. So curiosity is the thing as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, it's changed over the years. It's gotten better, but I do believe that you're an exception, or what's becoming more normalized. But as a parent, I can tell you that we are inundated by professionals with what our children can't do, and almost to lower our expectations so that we're not hurt or whatnot, which is we need to be realistic, but focusing on what you were just speaking of, curiosity and understanding and working with what they can do is definitely it's going to provide the child much more opportunity than the mindset of limiting expectations and what they can't do. Fortunately, I've never had a doctor tell me my kid can't do something. Like I never got the speech from the doctor saying my child will never speak and will never live on his own. Like we've never had anybody with authority come to us that way. So thankfully, because I would probably let them know something, but
So how have you managed that?
manage not
How have
having
you managed to avoid people being negative about your child?
Well, I think it's in the demeanor that I come to them. Like, for example, I didn't go to the ABA therapy center asking them how to potty train my child. I went and took a class and learned how to potty train my child and then gave them guidance on how we were going to potty train my child. So a professional would have a hard time then coming to me and being in the position where they were going to tell me anything about my child. I've always taken the upper hand and just moved with the knowing that I know my child best, and I educate myself, I research, I believe in science, I know how to read a study to see if it's valid or not. And so I'm self-informed and confident.
There is an expression called pacing and leading, which I'd like to just comment about because of what you just said. You went to ABA, you found out what the normal was, so you were not in conflict with ABA when you decided, okay, this is ABA, but a bit of a change, which is working better for my son. It's called pacing and leading. So you actually go into somebody else's world, understand their world, and then see how their world can actually help your child in an even better way than they'd imagined to start with. And I think your attitude of being, you're not, you can see from your demeanor, you're not prepared to accept he can't do it. It just oozes out of you. He's going to be able to do this. We all think he can. And also, he's picking up. I mean, autistic children are very good, in my experience, of picking up on what you're thinking, even if you're not saying anything. And so you're thinking he's going to be able to do this. And so you're giving that message out to him all the time.
Yeah. Yes, I didn't know there was an actual name for that. But what you just described is what I do in a messy way, I guess. Yeah.
Perfect.
And then you brought on that you just mentioned that I didn't have this in my outline at all to talk about. I don't know how much information you have on it. I don't have a ton of information in regards to research, or if there is research out there, but that might be my next rabbit hole. You mentioned something about our kiddos with neurodiversity are very attuned to us. Like they can sense what we're thinking. And recently there's been a lot of talk about telepathy.
Yep.
Nonverbal children. And that's kind of I've noted that. I put a pin in that in my head to kind of like look into a little bit further. But first of all, oh my God, I have to start minding my thoughts because my kid can read my thoughts. And then second of all, oh, how cool. And
yeah, I'll tell you a bit about it that I found out so far. And I've not actually worked in this field, but I've loved listening to it. A woman whose name completely defeats me at the moment started doing some research into telepathy with non-verbal children, and she's produced a lot of tapes which are all audios called the telepathy tapes, and in there she's done loads and loads of anecdotal research with people, with children and young adults now who are non-verbal. And they are absolutely fascinating. And they fascinated me despite the fact I haven't got a non-verbal child. But they're just, I think the way she's put them together are just absolutely astounding. And I watched, I think, about the first series of them that was about 10 tapes. And it was just really interesting. And it opened up a new world of telepathy and how children can communicate with each other very clearly, telepathically. Now, whether you believe that or not, I mean, my recommendation is listen to the telepathy tapes if you're interested and see what you think. And she's done series 2 since then, I think, which she was going to go into doing more research for. But parking that on one side, let's just talk about how a child can pick up on your thoughts. 2 things. Firstly is a lot of children who are neurodiverse are very, very good at picking up on energy. And every parent will know this, because if your child gets upset, do you manage to stay cool, or do you get upset as well? Because you're picking up on their energy. And so you then picked up energy in your energy system, which is your son's in effect, and it's jangling your energy system. And the same as the other way around. If mum gets upset, does your child get upset? That's the easiest way to tell whether they are highly sensitive. And there's all sorts of reasons why people are highly sensitive. And when anybody who's diagnosed with ADHD or autism tends to be pretty much sensitive, and you probably know that already. And so, I mean, I always remember a woman who said to me, I can't understand why I can't get on with my new partner's children. They come around every 2 weeks or something at the weekend, and I welcome them, walk into the house, as it were, and I say, how nice to see you, etc. And I said to her, and what are you thinking? She said, oh, I have to mention, my thoughts are, here comes the kids from hell. And I said, don't you think they're getting that? She said, but I don't say any of that. And I said, I know you don't say any, but they can get it. And if you just think about your interaction with anybody, neurodiverse or whatever, whatever you say, they can pick up a lot more on the energy that's flying about between you. However nice somebody says, gives you a compliment, you might think, with your teeth, that isn't quite what you thought, is it? And so telepathy is only another step of those, really. It's just and it's an incredible skill. When you listen to the telepathy tapes about how these kids can manage to communicate with each other telepathically. And of course, just think about it. That's humans. Dogs communicate with each other telepathically without a shadow of doubt. And so does the animal world. So is it any surprise that some humans can as well?
No, it just fascinates me and is so interesting. The telepathy between each other, and then with the parents, I really want to research that further. I'm gonna listen to those tapes. I'm excited about getting to learn that.
There is also, I do some work. I do energy work with something called energetic NLP, and he does. The guy is who is the founder of that is Art Geiser, who lives in California, and he does online classes all the time about different aspects of energetic NLP. So it takes the best of NLP and the best of the energetics, spiritual systems, and welds them together. And one of the courses he did, he's done before now, and I keep asking him to do it again, would he mind, is a course for empaths, people who are very good at picking up what's going on with somebody else. And the thing about being an empath is it's extraordinary that you can tell whether somebody's really ill or whatever, but you don't want to be picking up on their energy. And it's so easy to pick up on people's energy when they're upset. And so it teaches his empath course teaches you to let go of the energy that you just picked up and not make it, you shouldn't be walking around with other people's energy, basically.
This has to do with like emotional maturity and it's definitely something that my son has given me a lot of opportunity to work on. So yeah, it's to the point now, like even this morning, I don't know why, but he wanted me to be upset. He was coming up to me and opening like physically opening my mouth and then going, stop. And he wanted me to mimic him. So he like wanted me to yell stop at him. He wanted my energy to be not calm. And I don't know what that was about, but he will get upset and then try to like physically make me upset. And I'm like, I'm not upset, baby. I'm calm. And I'm not like
Oh.
he wants to create a snowball of energy. And he tries to make me an accomplice in that. And I'm just like, no, I'm calm, baby. Yep, we're not going to do that. And that's just not what we're doing. So he provides me ample opportunity to not pick up energy. Because I don't know why he wants me to, but
Yeah. I'll think about that one and let you know if I come up with anything. I'm sure you'll explore it.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll have more opportunities. And I always say, people always tell me, oh, you're so patient, this must be hard and whatnot. And my response, and I always kind of like watching the person's face, my response to them is yeah, my son is very patient with me. I'm so fortunate that he's so patient with me, and he allows me so much time to learn what he's trying to teach me. Yeah.
It might be something like he just wants you to join the clan, as it were. The clan of panickers.
Yeah, so he also will do certain things to get himself going. Like he'll videotape himself mad and screaming, and then he'll rewatch it, and then it'll make all that energy happen. He'll make those faces and do that in the mirror, which then allows for it to like continue
Okay.
and build. So that's what I know, not to feed into it. But going back to that telepathy thing, it made me think of an incident that happened, and had it not been pointed out, I wouldn't have noticed it.
Yeah.
So we used to go out every week to dinner with a friend who happened to be a doctor. He was our friend before we were pregnant, and even knew our son. But then when he was born, we were still going out to dinner every week with them. And my son was sitting in his little booster seat thing, and I had given him a tortilla chip. He had one tortilla chip in his hand, and for some reason, and this wasn't like an established thing, I hadn't understood this behavior. He was still under one. We didn't know about autism, neurodiversity. That wasn't a thing in our lives yet. And I handed him one tortilla chip, and his other hand was empty. And I somehow knew that if I put another tortilla chip in his other hand, he would eat it. And so I did that without thinking about it, without even considering that I knew that this was something to do. And my friend, who is a doctor, he was like, apparently he had been observing while I was busy not paying attention to anything else but him and his tortilla chips. And when I finished that and my son ate the chip, he's like, how did you know that if you put another tortilla chip in his hand, he would eat that? And I was like, did I do that? He was like, yeah, I watched you. And I was like, I knew. I don't know. I just did it because I knew. And I'm wondering if that was a bit of telepathy.
Yeah. And I think you're also so up for a year. You've been so good at observing him. You're picking up on tiny things he might do when he wants to eat something. He might raise his hand and go like that or something, but you may not even have noticed because you're a busy lady, and there's a lot going on in your life. And but I do think we actually pick up on a lot more than we realize we do. I often talk to my dogs. I have 2 golden retrievers, and I can talk to them. And I say to them, "Where's Daddy?" And one of them will march up and look in the direction of up the garden or whatever to tell me where Daddy is. They can pick up on this stuff, and so they can pick up on your words, and they can pick up on your energy, and they can pick up on. They know what you're trying to do. I think it's just a fascinating world.
It's so fascinating. Brains are amazing. Brains are amazing. And so I was going to wrap this all up. We're coming up on our hour. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. It always is. One of the things that I was going to bring this all back into is, it's a lot of work observing all of this, brainstorming, keeping up with it, keeping everybody on the team informed and coordinated. And so that is why FPKX was created, which Jay Sean and Alan happen to be co-founders for, was for my son in particular, so that we could keep everybody on the same page. We could all work on the same goals. We could be persistent and consistent, and have a way for everybody to communicate, because we can and we should. And so these experiences that we've just talked about for the last hour were all a culmination of why and how we use FPKX.
Yeah.
So
it's so important that everybody's on the same page.
So important.
That's what we find so much about the work I do with ADHD and dyslexia, that we need the teachers on the same page as the children and their caregivers, who may well be able to observe things and understand what the teachers are trying to do and support the teachers.
Exactly. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you, Olive. Do you have any final words that you would like to say before we play our outro?
I think I'm going to go back to almost the first thing you said, which was about, it was about knowing your child best, but also about assuming competence. When you assume competence, they will get it. You've seen it happen so many times yourself. You remember when a child first starts to feed themselves, you give them a spoon and you can imagine them feeding themselves. And if you assume competence, sooner or later, they'll be able to do it. If
no
you
matter
go,
how it looks, no matter, what path you take, you just got to know that it's going to be different. And you can also pivot. Trying isn't going to hurt anything.
Exactly. But if you don't give them the spoon, they're never going to get it.
Exactly. Exactly. If you assume that they can't and you never provide the spoon, guess what? You fulfilled that prophecy. They're not going to.
And guess what? You might be right.
Oh, well, it was a pleasure, Olive. It's always great to see you and talk to you. And I don't know what number podcast this is, but I would bet with you and I, it's going to be the best.
Yes.
So it was a pleasure. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for watching.
Goodbye. Thank you very much. Bye.
FPK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast. Mind unlocked. With every episode we cast real talk, real tools, wisdom on the fly. Tune in, geek out, reach for the sky.